So this here is going to be a painting video for the Master of Possession, and we did him up in Alpha Legion with some blue flames. So if you like the way he looks, please feel free to stay tuned, and we'll show you how we painted him up. There's some other photos of him from other angles at the end of the video if you want to skip ahead and see those. Color scheme is in the comments down below. And if you like this kind of content, please feel free to leave a comment, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and otherwise not, stay tuned. So this here is going to be a video on how to paint the Master of Possession for the Alpha Legion. So we've started up with just the basic model from Shadowspear and now the Start Collecting Space Marine set. So the first thing we did with him is we just primed him with Mechanicus Standard Gray spray paint. And that gave us our primer and our base coat. So with that done and good coverage there, we'll move on to the first color we're going to do. So the first thing we're going to do is work on the robes. So we're going to make them green, and what we're going to do is base coat them with some Kabalite green. So that'll give us a nice aqua base color, which will go good with the armor, which we're going to do later. So we'll start that now. So we're going to take some of this Kabalite green and just lightly going over the robes here with a runny layer of this, and as it dries it'll thin out. Just like so. So this is our model now that we finished with our green, and as you can see we've done pretty much the front, the back, the bottom, get up and inside the legs here, space underneath. So we've got all that done. What we're going to do now is add our first shade, which will be Coelia Greenshade, and we'll be pretty generous with that over the model. We're just going to apply that comfortably all over the place. Letting it fill the tattered areas. Doing our best to brush it into the crevices and to try not to have it pooling on the high areas. Though that said, the next highlight layer will cover most of that up once it's dry. So this is our model now that the shade has dried, and as you can see, it's filled in all of these spots here. It's a little bit messy looking, a little bit scattery, but we'll get that as we dry brush over the top. So what we're going to do now is one dry brush of Sybarite green, which is another aqua, though a couple of shades lighter. And we're just going to dry brush that right over these cloaks. It'll take us a while to get a nice shade of green on it. But as you can see, it's lighting up quite nicely there. So we're going to keep going at this till we've lit up the entire cloak, and then we'll be back in a few moments. This is our model after our Sybarite green highlight. And as you can see, we've lit up the higher points while keeping the recesses still dark. So we're going to put one more highlight layer over that. We're going to really pump the green on it. We're going to go with a little bit of Moot green. And what we're going to do there is a very light dry brush, because it's a very bright color. And then we're going to dry brush that right across. Right across the cloaks, as you can see. Creating that nice aqua type color. So we'll do the rest of the model. We'll be back in a few minutes. This is our model now that we finished with our Moot green highlights. And as you can see, we went all over the leg and all over the bones and all over the detail, which is why we did this color first. But as you can see, we did all of the highlights, and we have a nice greenish aqua type robe, which will go great with the Alpha Legion as we go from here. So with that finished, we'll move on to our next part. So for our next color, we're going to start working on the bones. So that's the skull up here, the 3 skulls on the back, the 2 on the edge of the backpack, as well as these bone vents that are here, all of the feathers, all of the scrolls, and the face itself and the bones around the neck. So all of that's going to go with a base of Rakarth flesh. While we're at it, don't forget there are a bunch of skulls hanging from the cloaks here. So all that's going to get just that base coat of Rakarth flesh. And we'll do different things depending on what they are moving up from here. But initially it's all going to get that watered down Rakarth flesh look. It's also worthwhile to notice that there's some wrappings on the holster here. We're going to come back later after we've done the holster in brown and touch up this stuff. So we'll repeat these colors in a few other places that weren't worth doing just yet, but we'll hit them later. So if they show up done at some point in the video, it's just because we hit them. Same color scheme as what we're doing now. So here's our model now that we finished with the Rakarth flesh. And as you can see, because the layer was watered down enough, the detail still exists. So you can see the carvings in the skull here and the forehead. You can see all the details on the teeth and the eyes, all the feathers and such are here. So all that's fine, and that's pretty much, we did everything that we said we were going to do. Skulls on the bottom, and then the ones hanging from the cloak and such. So now that we're finished with our Rakarth flesh, what we're going to do is add some shades. So we're going to do two different shades. The first one is going to be Seraphim Sepia. And what we're going to do with that is everything skull related. So the mask, the bones here, the skulls down below, pretty much everything we've done with Rakarth flesh, with the exception of the feathers. Those will get a different shade, but we're going to put Seraphim Sepia on all of the bone work and the scroll as well. What we're going to do is just be generous with it and just go over the skull, the horns, on the other side as well. So here we are after we finish with the Seraphim Sepia. The next thing we're going to do is take some Reikland Fleshshade, which is a bit more reddish or more pink, and we're going to put that on all of the feathers. Once again, being careful not to get it on the green if we can. And then when this dries, what I'm going to do is come back and do another little bit again, but just sort of around the beginning of the feathers. So it's a little darker here and lightens as we move out. So now that all of our shades have dried, we're going to add a highlight to each of those areas. So the first one we're going to do is all the skulls. And with that, we're going to do Screaming Skull. And start going over the skull area. And keep doing that until we light it all up. Keeping in mind that this is a very bright color, and so it won't take much for it to overpower the model. So this is our model now that we finished with the Screaming Skull. And as you can see, we pretty much did all the skeletons. So the head and the bones, the skulls down around the base, the staff, and then we did the skulls around the back, and then the back of the standard as well. So we've got all that done. What we're going to do next is take a little bit of Pallid Witch Flesh, and we're going to dry brush that on all of the feathers, as well as the scrolls down at the bottom here. So this is our model now that we finished with both the Screaming Skull and the Pallid Witch Flesh. So the Screaming Skull we had already discussed on the front. The feathers have been done with the Pallid Witch Flesh now. And as you can see, there's a difference between the brownish yellowish of the skulls and the reddish color of the pinkish color of the feathers here. Now the armor is going to be fairly straightforward. What we're going to do is start with a base layer of metallics, and then we'll shine that up brighter, and then we'll coat that with a contrast paint, sort of a watery glaze. So we're going to start with some Leadbelcher for a base, and we're going to do all of the armor, the leg, the other foot, the arm, the other arm, all of the torso in here underneath the robes. We're just going to take our Leadbelcher and just start going over all of the armor locations here, avoiding going over our green that we worked so hard to get right. So here's our model now that we finished with the Leadbelcher base. And as you can see, we did both arms, legs, the feather foot. We did most of the staff and then all of the design around it, all of the backpack, minus the couple of spouts where the bones were, and then minus all the skulls on above. And then we did the bottom of the staff, and then we did the blade. And then we did the handle of the gun and the edge of the barrel, everything like that in holster. So we finished all that with Leadbelcher, and what we're going to do now is add a highlight layer to that, which we will do with Runefang steel, which is exceptionally bright. And what we're going to do is just dry brush that Runefang steel right over the armor like so, over the arms, and then over anything else that'll be armor, so the upper torso here, as well as all the backpack. So we'll do most of that now, be back here in a few minutes, and then we'll be ready for adding the armor color. So there's our model after the Runefang steel is finished, and it's really starting to take shape now. So our next thing to do is to add the Alpha Legion tint to the armor itself. So the first thing we're going to do is take some Terradon Turquoise, and we're going to mix that with medium or water, almost 2 to 1, so it's very, very runny, and effectively a glaze. We're just going to glaze that right over the armor, everything that we made silver here, like so. So we'll finish up all of the silver armor bits, then being careful not to retouch it. We'll let it dry, and we'll be back here in a few more moments. So here's our model now that we're finished with the Terradon Turquoise, and as you can see here, this is a pretty good Alpha Legion color. We could leave it just the way it is. It's perfectly acceptable. But what we're going to do is add one more watered down layer of Akhelian green, which is a little bit more bluer. And it's also watered down considerably. And all we're going to do with that is just add a little bit to some of the areas of the model, just to get a little bit more blue into it. Just like so. So now that we're finished with our blue armor color, we're going to move on to doing the trim, of which we're going to do with Stormhost silver. So we're going to take a little bit of that, and we're going to just start doing all of the trim and all of the iconography on the armor here. So here's our model as we're moving. Our next thing to do is going to be to start on all of the brown items. So the staff that's here, as well as the holster that's there. There's a small pouch in the corner here. So all of these little things here will start with a base coat of Rhinox hide, and then we'll probably add a dry brush of Skraag brown, or an edge highlight if you prefer to do it that way. But anyway, we're just going to do it like this with our Rhinox hide, and it's another watered down layer, so you might need 2 coats just to get the coverage you want. So we'll keep moving along like so, and then we'll put the Skraag brown dry coat over the top of it. So we'll be back in a few minutes after this is done. So as you can see here, the staff is finished, and it's got a 2-tone effect because of the Skraag brown over the top, same as the leather bag, and then same as the holster. And then, as we had alluded to earlier, we did the straps while we were waiting for it to dry, similar to the same way we did the scroll. So that finishes the staff, And we're going to move on to the flames now. And the first thing we're going to do with the flames is take some Celestia Gray as a base and start going over very meticulously all of the flames here. That's a very light base. It may take 2 coats. So here's our model now that we finished with the Celestia Gray base. And as you can see, we did all of the flames on the 3 burning spots as well as the one in the hand. So what we're going to do now is shade all of that. And we're going to do that with some Hexenwraith Flame, which we haven't used in a while. So we'll do that now. That's going to give us a nice green color. Something like that. So we'll do the other 3 flames and we'll be back in a few minutes. This is our model now that the Hexenwraith Flame has dried. And what we're going to do now is dry brush a lighter color over that. So we're going to use some Pallid Witch Flesh. And all we're going to do is just lightly dry brush that over the flames. So here's our model now that we finished with the Pallid Witch Flesh. And all we're going to do now is add one more color. Normally we'd add a glaze or a contrast paint, but all we've got at the moment is a yellow shade. But all we want is a generic yellow over the top. So we're going to use a very, very, very watered down shade. And we're just going to add a little bit of that there, just to add that yellowish flame color. So now while we're waiting for that yellow shade to dry, we're going to work on the buckle we have right here. That's holding the belt together. And that's going to just take a little bit of Retributor Armor. Something like that. So we'll keep going with that. We'll probably do a couple of these trinkets up here and a few other little specks around the model just for aesthetics. But all in all, we're going to finish that and be back here in a moment. We're going to now do the eyes on both the model itself as well as the staff. And Troll Slayer Orange is a good choice for that. It's very, very vibrant and stands out quite a bit. Just like so. Just like that. So we'll do the model itself and we'll be back here in a few minutes. We only have a couple of things left to do. One of them is these larger feathers on the back here. You can see some more visible ones here, 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 and here. So we're going to do those up. They're going to take a base color of Incubi Darkness, or just some dark blue color. And we're just going to very meticulously paint these like so. So we'll get those done. Probably put a second coat because it's a little bit of watered down paint here. 2 thin coats and all. So we'll do that. We'll do the rest of them. We'll be back here in a few minutes. So our feathers are done with the Incubi Darkness. and we've picked out each one. So what we're going to do now is add a highlight layer over the top of that with just the edge highlight blue horror color. So it's just a little tiny bit of a dry brush. It's quite light, so we don't need much of it. Just to brighten things up a little bit there. So our feathers are now finished, and as you can see, they stand out quite nicely. We also did the blade at his hip with the same color scheme. So we're going to move on from there. We're going to take a little bit of Xandri dust, and we're just going to do all of these cables and cords that are just holding up his trinkets, as well as the ones that are around the standard here. Just add a little bit of color in to separate them out. So this is the end of our Xandri dust, and we did the cabling and the lines. We also did the base itself, which will flock in a few minutes. But we're going to move on to our last color, which is going to be Uriel Yellow. And all we're going to do with this is the Eye of Terror over here, the Eye of Horus. Just going to color that in like so. Just like that. So this here's our finished model, and as you can see, it turned out pretty good. We clear coated it and flocked up the base. So with this, our model is now ready for the table. If you found this video was helpful, or if you enjoyed this video, if you kind of enjoy the channel or videos like this, please feel free to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment if you enjoyed this at all. We'll put some pictures at the end of this video, just so you can see some of the other angles in case there's some details you had missed in the overall video. And otherwise than that, like the video, that always helps. And we will see you at the next painting video we do.